Good evening, friends, and welcome to yet another awesome session of Mindful Living. We truly appreciate your taking out the time and joining us this Sunday evening. Like all sessions of Mindful Living, this one is going to add tremendously to your quality of life and help you achieve greater success in both professional and personal life. The seed of this session was sown in a conversation I had with a friend of mine from Xerox a couple of years back, nearly a decade back. And over a coffee conversation in Ibis Hotel in Gurgaon, he asked me this question and I remember it very distinctively. Ashish, what are your strengths? And I kind of blurted out two, three of them. And then he pushed me a little bit more and I shared one or two more. And then he said something which has stayed with me ever since and kind of become a key part of the work I do now as a coach and a trainer. But before I share with you what he said, is it okay if I ask you a question? Please type Y in the chat box if it is okay for me to ask you a question. Please type. Thank you, Richard. Thank you, Dhruv. Thank you, Kanika. Thank you, Rajiv ji. So friends, let me ask this question to you, which my friend asked me. What do you think are your strengths? So please take a moment and write down what do you think are your strengths. And if you are done with writing, please type D in the chat box. What are your strengths? Thank you, Richard. If you're done writing your strengths, please type OK. Thank you, Rajiv ji. Thank you. So it looks like a few of you have got your strengths written down. And if you have got more than three strengths written down, please type the number of strengths that you have got. So if it is one or two, then it's okay, don't mention. But if it is three, four, five, please write how many strengths have you got. What is the number of strengths that you have listed? Five, five. Okay. Rupambika, five. Thank you. I request everybody to be active on the chat. Please share how many strengths have you got? Four. Okay. That's an interesting point of view, Richard, and I'll request you to hold on to this and either it will get answered during the session. If not, please pick it up in the Q&A. So this is typically, in my coaching sessions, I ask people how many strengths you have got. And usually people come up with two or three. And when I push them a little bit more, they come up with four or five. 99.99% people don't list more than five strengths. And that's something similar I came up with, three, four, or five. I don't remember exactly what was the number I came up with. But what my friend told me was something which was mind-blowing. And he said, Ashish, you have far more than the number that you have just told me, or the strengths that you have just told me. And that was interesting. And later he spoke to me about something which I'm not going to talk about. I'll let Kanika talk about that. I'm not going to steal her thunder. But the point is, we have far more strengths than we think we have. And the other part is we forget our strengths. And does anything come up for you when you see this picture? in the context of what we are discussing, if anything comes up for you in the context of strengths, when you look at this picture, please unmute yourself and speak. And you may use the reactions button to raise your hands, unmute and speak. What comes up for you when you look at this picture in the context of strengths?
किस चीज के बारे में
reminds me of Jambanji reminding Hanuman only.
Yes, very right, Dhruv. He forgot, a person like Hanuman who has tremendous strengths, tremendous, magical, immense powers, forgot what his strengths were. And in a society that is so obsessed with weakness, we tend to forget what our strengths are because we are always pulled up for what is wrong, starting from the years we have spent in school and colleges and through the years of our working in the corporations. Mostly people are talking about what is wrong with us. People rarely have this conversation with us about what's right with us, what our strengths are. And that happens to the best of us and we forget. So our session today is about focusing on our strengths. And when we focus on our strengths, there is magic that happens. And when you look at the most successful people in the world, whether it is in the area of sports or politics or business, they have got to their peaks by focusing on their strengths, not by being obsessed with their weakness. And that is the reason we organize this session today. And we invite Kanika Kohli, who's a strengths coach, who's a professional certified coach with ICF, a special practitioner with EMCC, and who has been working as a coach for over a decade. Her journey as a coach started in 2011, working with Gallups. And she is a trained coach. She uses different modalities like yogic wisdom, innermost shift coach, grow model, big five model, amongst others. She's a researcher. She's recently completed her research for a PhD program on mindfulness, which is her other passion. And in her previous life, she worked with organizations like Gallup, Sun Life, IPE, Global, and Citibank. And she set up her own, she had an entrepreneurial stint where she set up and managed a multi-million-dollar organization in the space of HR and strategy consulting. And this is part of her introduction, because if I completely introduce her, it will probably take another, lot of time in our session today. So this is part of our session. She's also a gold medalist and an MBA, and many more achievements to her credit. So Kanika, thank you very much for taking out time and being with us today. Really appreciate it. I had to follow up a lot with her, I think over 2 months before we could get a date with you.
Hello, everyone. Yes, thanks, Ashish. Thanks for bringing this to all of us here. It's always a pleasure to connect with the mindful living community. Looking forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Kanika. And friends, that's about Kanika. Before I hand over to her, I'll take a minute to introduce myself. Please type FT, first time. Yeah, thank you, Rupambika. If you're joining a mindful living session for the first time, please type FT in the chat box. Yeah, Pawan, thank you. So some of you may be joining us for the first time. So for the benefit of those who are joining us for the first time, my name is Ashish and I'm the founder of Mindful Living. Mindful Living community was formed during COVID. And we have been conducting sessions every weekend on helping corporate professionals lead their life consciously. It's a community on WhatsApp. It's a no-nonsense community where there are no good morning, good night, or religious political posts, just professionals living consciously and helping each other live consciously by sharing their challenges and successes. We don't advertise about the work we do. So only way you can join the community is when somebody invites you to join, and which is what I would like to do with open arms. You can scan the QR code shared here to join the community, or you can click on the link which we are sharing in the chat to join the community. You can also subscribe to our YouTube channel, where there are more than 200 videos on living consciously, how you can be mindful and how that can help you be healthy, happy, and wealthier in your lives. That's about mindful living and me in brief. In my previous life, I worked in corporations like Tata AIG, Xerox, Future Generali, Marsh, HCL Healthcare, and Healthcare at Home before I set up mindful living. Um, and while the session today, we are going to be opening up for question and answers towards the end of the session. I will urge you to keep your cameras on. That is one way you will be focused on the session. It makes it more interactive for the and engaging for the speaker as well. And this is something which is very powerful. So I would urge you not to multitask. Keep your cameras on and be fully engaged in the session. While we are going to take Q&A towards the end, please keep typing your questions and comments in the chat. I will pick them up and we will take them up towards the end of the session. So remain actively engaged. And once we open up, use the raise hand button to raise your hand and we will take your questions. And during the session, if you like something that resonates with you, show thumbs up, love, whatever way you want to stay engaged. So on that note, I will invite Kanika now to take the session forward and welcome each one of you and Kanika for this to the session.
Thank you so very much, Ashish. This is so great to be here. So all the people who are right now multitasking, let me give you a hook. And probably that's going to be a talent as well for you. That's how you get motivated as well. And that's a word that we say a ranger in Gallup's Strengths Finder. These are the people who like to juggle too many balls at a one time. And so while you would love to do that, let me invite you here to this session because we are going to give you enough and more opportunities to juggle between things and ideas. So all the arrangers, all the people who are multitasking, please welcome to this session back here. And if you can put your videos on, we'll know that you're with us. Thank you so much. So we begin. Here, I'm going to start my presentation. It's a thing, we'll keep it interactive. Can you all see my presentation? The PPT is visible?
Yes.
Okay, great. So as we all know that we are going to be talking about the unique talents and how that can be a gateway for us to succeed and live a fulfilling life. And that's what is the philosophy of strengths. This is something which came to me as a gift through my work with Gallup Consulting. And I just completely am passionate about this work because this has personally helped me a lot in my life. And so I'm going to share a lot of research, a lot of practical experience, and some insights which can be fun for all of you to know. Before we get in there, let's focus on you. So, as Ashish mentioned, that his friend had asked him, what are his strengths? So, let me ask you not about the strengths, but just any one adjective that comes to your mind. Put that in the chat box that best describes you. Free, authentic. Okay. Helpful. Uh-huh. Great. Correlations vibrant. Yeah. Okay, great. And so, kind. We need a lot of kind people in this world today. Yes. Analytical, comprehensive thinker, learner. Sure. It's really nice to see people who've written more than one adjective. It's very interesting. Okay. How easy or difficult was it for you to think of it? I'll leave you with this insight to this question to really think over. How promptly could you come up with an adjective for yourself? And did you think that I need to give out something positive, something negative? How did that thought make you feel? When you say social, authentic learner, you could have chosen something else. It might be interesting for you to just reflect that what brought you to write these words here for yourself. It was difficult. Interesting. Sure. Okay. So, what from looking at the topic today that we are covering, what is the one expectation or one thing that you would want to take away from this session? It'd be nice to know a few expectations. Surprise you. Okay, that's a tough one. My God, I'm feeling the pressure. Let's see if that surprises you. Learn from others on how I can improve. Okay. Want to know about my 5 strengths? Super. How to be mindful in day-to-day life? Sure. Become aware of your strengths. How do I identify my strengths and leverage it better? Great. Recognize, okay, how to deal with weaknesses. Oh, Richard, great. That are apparent to others. Okay, sure. Great. All of us are spending this Sunday evening in the right place because you will get something or the other on each of these aspects that you've come here or the expectation that you have for this from this session today. So let's get into the strengths philosophy. What is it? So, as Richard mentioned, he'd like to know what are the weaknesses which are apparent to others. That's what all of us we are focusing on. The foundation of our very thought, our very expectation for many of us in a very innate level is what is wrong with us. The libraries are full of books which are talking about how to get better in that, how to manage this, how to manage that. However, there's very little which focuses on, let's focus on who you are. What were you born as? How have you developed what you were born as? What is your talent? How do we work with that? And very interestingly, many of us tend to think that talent is not something which all of us we have. This is something for a privileged few. But the truth is that talent is a naturally occurring pattern which exists in all of us. It impacts our thoughts, our feelings, our behaviors that can actually help us to achieve something very productively in our life. Some of the talents, how many times we see that, okay, to actually organize a project or organize a simple weekend get together with your school friends or office mates, it comes easy. It's expertly organized. People choose you. If you want something to be done, ask this person to be done. Easily influencing others. To get something at the office, a weekend, if you want something to be done, people reach out to you. Oh, here, you get all the people together and get this particular task done. You want everybody to come in a particular kind of color, particular kind of dress, a code to be followed. You are the person who can influence people. Talent. We underplay that. We do not recognize it sometimes. We can effectively solve complex problems, consistently have a positive outlook towards life. All of these daily things, some things that we sometimes do not even realize are some things we are doing very naturally, are all part of talent because they're coming very naturally to us. Gallup's world of talent comes from deep research which gives us some 34 talents identified after several questionnaires run through several number of people, which culminated into a set of questions which are asked of a person, and that results in a report which gives us the top 5 signature themes. So, the world of talent at Gallup is about individual signature themes. And interestingly, there's 1 in a 33 million chance for these top 5 to be in the same order. That's how unique we are. And we are underplaying it each day. There's 1 in 275,000 chance of the same top 5 regardless of the order. That again talks to the point of uniqueness. Interestingly, there's no cultural impact on that, not significant, across 26 countries which we have researched on. And there are no good or bad talent themes. Every talent, every unique thing that you unique habit, unique behavior that you possess, all of us we possess, we can actually drive it from the talent, the innate uniqueness that we are born with. And as I said, it's not a privilege. Every one of us has a talent. So, how do talents develop? It starts at the birth. So this is coming from Bruce Lipton's research, which talks about from birth to 3 years, a child's brain, a baby's brain is very flexible. It's very active. The baby is observing everything that is happening in and around his or her world. And based on that, the baby is learning. As the baby grows from 3 to 15 years, now the patterns start to form in the mind, in the brain. For example, if I'll touch this, it is hot, it'll burn my hand, so I don't need to do this. These are all patterns and all the learnings which are happening during that time. At that time, as a baby and a child in the growing years observes people doing things intuitively, the parents, the immediate world, teachers, they tend to identify what is the fastest way of doing things. If you have someone around you who's been doing things in a certain way and you have that innateness within you, one will tend to identify all of those patterns in their own being. The synaptic connections in their mind will be made. Between 3 to 15, these start to firm up. Repeated patterns in one's life and in one's own personality starts to develop those structures in the mind, in the brain. Interestingly, from the yogic perspective, if I bring that perspective to Gallup's science, it's very interesting that at 5 years, a child starts to develop a smita or a sense of self, which is also very interesting because this is the time when a child is developing that sense of self and trying to develop their own individual personality. After 15, these are now structured networks. So these motivations, what motivates me if I'm meeting my friends, how that energizes me, while there are some people who just do not want to meet the same people all the time. Yes, the deep connections are good, but I want to meet more people. I want to have more interactions. All of those structures are now formed because that is what energizes me. That is what is the motivation behind me doing whatever I'm doing. So that comes from these, that starts to come from these structured networks. And that is what we are looking at as a process of developing these talents in our life. So as I mentioned, these synaptic connections in our brain, it's just a visual of what's happening, all the electrodes and everything which are connecting in our brain as we are growing up. And we tend to form those talents in our life and the motivations which excite us, which energize us. So if a person likes to meet more people, that is something they're doing more often because that's energizing. And while somebody who's like refraining from meeting too many people is not doing that because staying with themselves, sitting in their own self and probably musing is something which energizes them. So we are deeply motivated by that. Okay, I've been talking for too long. Now let's get some action here. So, getting your inputs. I'm going to throw a situation and ask you to drop a letter in the chat box. So, let's see how many of you talk to people in elevators, airplanes, grocery stores, wherever you go. Drop a W in the chat box if you do that, if that's you. Uh-huh. And these people may also want to think that if you're the people who like to, if you get into a conference or in a meeting, you would want to interact and collect as many business cards as possible for you during that meeting. If that's you, drop a W in the chat box. Uh-huh. We have quite a few. Beautiful. Okay, let's explore more. How many of you have a color-coded or very well-organized closet? All the blues on one side, pinks on one side, and it's like, believing that there's a thing for a place and a place for a thing. If that's you, drop a M in the chat box. Uh-huh. Okay. Books, yes, not clothes. Okay. Sometimes. Not color. Yeah, okay, but I organize. Sure. Yeah, sure. Okay, let's see how many of us make a list of things to do and make sure that we stick to it. If that's you, drop a A in the chat box. These are very daily life kind of things that I'm asking. Sometimes you do. Of course, yeah. Right, but don't stick. Okay. Okay. List, yes, can't follow all the times. Okay. Okay, when it's a food for thought. When you're not able to do that, how do you feel in your heart? How does that leave you with? So that's an interesting thought to really ponder over. But moving forward, drop R in the chat if you always make a beeline for familiar faces in a big party. When you go to a conference, a meeting, a big place, you're always finding, okay, who do I know? And then you stick to those people, hang around with those people. Yes, okay, okay, sure. Wonderful, wonderful. You're fine. Of course, Richard, I saw you nod the first time very big with the W because that's, you like to explore. Yes, of course. Okay. Drop a C in the chat if you always pick up a race or more often pick up a race while driving. Competition, competitive. See, we have a few. Sure. If not a race while driving, perhaps you kind of also compare how you're doing with your peers and how quickly can you reach some place. We'll talk more about that. Yes. Okay. Great. Yes, I get that. Right. Sure. Now, what is driving these decisions and behaviors in us? Do you think when we are doing this, when we are going to a conference and sticking to people that we know, or we are ready to explore, is it coming from a very thought through, very logical and a rational place? Are you consciously thinking, no, today I'm going to explore, and on another day You're thinking that, no, I am going to actually stick to the people that I know. I'll be only with the familiar faces. No, it's not a logical decision. It's something which is coming from a very different space. Yeah, subconscious, Rajiv, absolutely. Subconscious and reasoning too. Okay. But it's coming from a very different space. It's not like logically you're thinking. So, what's happening with these decisions is that only 30% of the times are the rational and predictable forces which are actually making us do certain things or take certain decisions and exhibit certain behaviors, while 70% of the times it's emotions and our human experience, which is coming from the innateness that energizes us, that motivates us, and it's coming from that space. Allowing a couple of seconds for you to digest this as we are getting into this. So, as we are exploring the emotions and the connectedness with the decisions and behaviors that we exhibit, let's understand from a daily standpoint, how can we really identify these clues to talent? When we have a yearning to do something, we look forward to these activities, we are naturally drawn to these activities, there is a yearning. You learn these things very quickly. It comes naturally to you. Somebody taught you, okay, an analysis, a theorem, or something which has come up. It's easy for you to grab your head around that. Or, for example, some people love to work with Excel. In fact, they have to make an Excel sheet for everything. They would not work without that. And that's coming from a space where it's your yearning and you are learning those kind of activities pretty quickly. Sometimes to identify and start using some of the calendars or new gadget becomes very easy for you because you are rapidly learning to use those. You're in a flow when you are actually getting to know these things and you're naturally drawn to those. Continue to be in the flow of those activities. There are glimpses of excellence where you surprise yourself, oh my God, how did I do this? I'm surprising myself. There is a very subconscious level of excellence in doing a certain task. That's your talent. That's a very innate thing that one is born with. And then after doing whatever you've done, which naturally resonates with one's energy, one feels very satisfied and look forward to opportunities. When can I do that again? That again is a clue for us that that's our talent. Now we've been talking about talent, but we all know that in the chat box we'd also seen this. We read that there's Rajiv has written that it's practice. Yes, of course it's practice. So then, what is this talent all about? Is it something that we can just practice and then can develop, or is there something different to it? Is there something more to it? Let's just understand that part of it. Now, when we are talking about strength, and then there's a conversation coming in what we are born with, what is natural to us, and then there's a conversation coming in which is about practice. Then we also think about, oh, but we also get trained, and there are skills also, and there is knowledge also. So, what is happening with all of this? The word and the literature that we all know for such a long time. So here I bring to you, what are the components of strength? The component of strength is talent, skill, and knowledge. So what is a talent? We already read that earlier. It's a naturally recurring pattern of thought, feeling, or behavior that can be applied very productively. Now that's something which is natural. I'm born with it. Or in the early years, this is something which has become my natural style, which is what energizes me, which is what motivates me. Now, once I start to identify that, I know who I am as a person, what I'm born with. Let's understand skill. It's a basic ability to move through the fundamental steps. How do I need to do a certain thing? If I need to drive a car, it's skill. I need to put the car into gear, if it's automatic, I need to follow certain sets, and then, fundamental steps of how do I really need to get a car to work for me. Knowledge. What is the role of a clutch? What is the role of the throttler? What is the role of a brake? That's knowledge, where we know either through formal or informal education, we've developed that. So all this while we've been talking about talent, and now we've introduced two more words, which is skill and knowledge. So let's understand it a little better with a fun exercise. So you may want to drop S for skill, K for knowledge, and T for talent in the chat box. So what do you think this is? For a nurse, if a nurse, he or she, can automatically go an extra mile to satisfy a patient, what do you think this would be? Skill, knowledge, or talent? S, K, or T? Which one do you think it is? Skill, okay. S, okay.
Talent.
T, yeah. Talent, okay. Okay. Can be all, okay. Interesting. Now that's a naturally occurring pattern. So it's a talent. Not every nurse will go extra mile to satisfy a patient. It won't come naturally to many. Being able to give an injection. What do you think this is? Skill. Absolutely. This is some of the steps that one needs to follow to administer an injection on a patient or somebody seeking that. So it's definitely a skill. Being able to comfortably ask sensitive questions. What do you think that is? Skill, talent, SK, okay. Knowledge, talent. Interesting. So we do have some people who are saying skill and knowledge, and some people are also saying talent, and so it's connection. Okay, Rajiv, connection. What? Okay. So it is indeed a talent, because to ask sensitive questions very comfortably, it doesn't come naturally to everyone. Someone just may feel very nervous to really do that, to ask very sensitive questions. So it is indeed something which is very natural to somebody, something we say, oh, this one does something so seamlessly and just like a breeze. That's something, of course, it can come from skill and knowledge, but we'll get into depths of that. But here, just park that this is talent. And we'll talk more about that. Knowing where the vein is located. So remember, knowledge was something what we learn as formal, or it's I think it's a very fairly simple. It's knowledge. All of us, we know it's knowledge. Knowing where the vein is located. So it's knowledge. Properly completing discharge forms. What do you think? Is it a skill, knowledge, or talent? Okay, skill, knowledge, okay. Skill and knowledge both, Rupambika, okay. Knowledge, okay, Richard. Great. This is skill, because this requires some amount of knowledge, the technical knowledge, but more the skill to it's a way how you write, which is something which is specific the steps that need to be followed to complete that particular task. Therefore, it falls under the category of skill. Now, let's identify. We've spoken about, before we understand strength from here, let's understand what is a non-strength. And it'll be interesting to know what you think of that. If we feel defensive about performance, like we said, when we had this thing that a nurse is not able to, or a nurse is comfortably able to ask tough questions. If somebody is feeling defensive about their performance in that, it's a non-strength. It comes in the way, or it's a barrier to optimum functioning. Experiences slow learning. Repeated experience does not help. Oh my God, I've done this so many times, but I'm not getting it. Excel just doesn't come to me. Consciously think through the steps of a process and continue to do that. It gives you jitters when one has to get into something which is a non-strength. Experience reduction in confidence in performing that activity. One just doesn't feel confident in doing that. One doesn't fathom oneself doing it for long and suffers stress and burnout while doing it. It just completely saps the energy. Like a strength, it energizes one. A non-strength just completely saps the energy, and one doesn't enjoy doing the process. Those are the things which are non-strengths. It takes a huge mental and emotional effort for somebody. For example, if somebody, it's not a talent, it doesn't come naturally for someone. To ask a difficult question or to ask something or have a conversation which can be tough will become very difficult for somebody. It will be a huge emotional and mental effort for somebody if it's not a strength. So then coming back and integrating knowledge, skill, talent, and strength, what would it be? A strength is the ability to provide near perfect performance, which is consistently done in any given activity. It's a productive application of talents. Now, here we are linking talents with strength. So talent is something which is innate. It is a recurring pattern of thoughts, feelings, and behaviors which already exists, which we can apply productively. Now then, what is the recipe for strength? I'll just quickly move to that just to be in the flow. The recipe for strength is talent plus the time investment in that, which creates a multiplier effect and gives us a strength. So something that we are born with, or it's a natural way for our existence. Once we start to develop that with skills and knowledge, it becomes our strength. So when we were identify certain things at skill and knowledge and talent during the nurse exercise, we were actually identifying it as strength. Somebody who may have an innate art of doing something or a talent of doing something, if we develop that with the skills by knowing what are the steps of doing that, spending time on that, understanding that through a formal or an informal education, it becomes our strength. Yeah. So the point here that we are trying to say is that for most of us, it's the refinement by developing that expertise is what makes the difference. We need to find the unique ways to achieve the quantum leap. And we really need to be combining those strengths and understanding ourselves what the themes of strengths are for us to be able to perform. Now, these are some stats which are already there, which define the world-class people and differentiate it from good to great. Very interesting. I'll tell you an incident which we learned from the coach of one of the best golfers. this guy always had this problem that whenever he was playing, whenever the ball went into the bunkers, he just couldn't get it out. He just couldn't do it. And all the time, what he was trying to do was to manage his weakness of how to um, really master the art of getting the ball out of it. Whereas the difference that came about was when his coach told him, rather than getting into how to manage your weakness, what you can't do well, how about you focus on how well, and he was the best in taking the ball to the right, at the right elevation, at the right distance from the next hole. Why don't you focus on that? Let's focus on that and see the shift. The moment that shift happened from not focusing on the weakness and to develop the strength and to naturally work on what he was born and gifted with, the shift happened, his game changed, and he became one of the best golfers. And I'm talking about Tiger Woods here. So that's what we learned from the coaches who've helped the best of us to become the world-class players that we are by focusing on strengths. I hope, Anjana, that makes you feel better.
It does.
All right, great. So, so the Clifton Strengths Finder has 34 themes. Here we've listed all of those. Now, these may just sound as some adjectives or some words that we've all heard and which have no meaning for us, but it becomes very important when we start to look at them in structures and how it becomes very effective for us to become better and to succeed in our life. And that's when we look at the 4 domains of strength. How each of these adjectives that are attributed to us after the test, that these are our strengths, what does that tell us? I'm a strategic thinker, I'm a great executor, I'm a great influencer, or I am a person who focuses on relationships. Now, the same person could be able to achieve something by just focusing on the natural talent, strength, or focusing on relations. Some people we see so many leaders who are focusing on relations and becoming the best in their organization. We see some mothers or some parents in their role at home by just being the executionists in their house and getting their children to be raised as the best and very disciplined people. So it's what comes naturally to us, what energizes us as a human, allows us to use those strengths and achieve what we want to do. And this knowledge primarily helps us and allows us to identify what is the domain in which we excel. And therefore, it becomes easier for us to have those kind of roles, those kind of tasks, those kind of hobbies that we want to focus on so that we remain happy and energized and be successful in our lives. Yeah. And if our goal is just to be happy, then we are successful anyway, because we'll be energized all the time and motivated and we are focusing on it. So, why strengths? It's an awareness of self. It's also, for example, when I was first, I took my test in 2010, I think 15 years ago. Yes. So when I got to know about myself, what my top themes are and what my 34 themes are, it not only gave me an awareness of self, it also gave me an idea by reading those themes that who are the kind of people that I'm also interacting with. For example, just like we did, drop a W in the chat box or drop a M in the chat box, you may have thought of, no, I am not like this, but I know of someone else who is like this. That also allows us to have an awareness of self and of the others. That we begin to understand that, oh, This is how I behave, and this is how some of the others that I'm interacting and working with, they behave. Therefore, that becomes a strengths language. So we are all talking about, hey, you're great at that. This is what your innate strength is. This is what your innate talent is. And therefore, we start to focus on, subconsciously, we're starting to focus on what is positive in each other, not just self, not just other, but us as a whole. And that becomes our language. And that is a great differentiator for a lot of places. And it also redefines how one looks at oneself. It shapes the lens. Let's take an example. For example, a person who may be futuristic. I'm just taking one of the examples, okay, one of the themes. Do you have a question, Richard?
Yes, but maybe later
Yes.
on. I don't want to interrupt the thing, but I'm very interested in the futuristic part because I am a strategist and am recognized as a future thinker. So I'm very keen to learn from you, Kanika. I'm also very talkative when I'm excited, so my apologies for that. I'll shut up now and listen.
Sure. So this might interest you in that case, because futuristic may be seen. So, for example, until you know yourself, from the strengths lingo, one may think that futuristic is somebody who is like always thinking about the future. Somebody has the thoughts in the clouds, or is a dreamer. Perhaps sometimes to the effect that one is not realistic. It's always in the future. It's not in the present. However, now this is something which we call as the basement. That's the dark, dingy place where we just put things which we don't need and which we don't like, and perhaps sometimes use it only when perhaps we have a need for extra space, etc., etc. So that's like the basement of a particular theme or a talent that one has. Now, when we start to look at it as something which energizes me, as something which allows me to be myself, allows me to be the motivated all the time and be successful in what I'm doing, then the same futuristic would start to be perceived as a person who's creative. Oh my God, thinking about future is stretching others, because moving people from just beyond the present into the future is a visionary, is not just thinking about today, is has a vision, and is also inspiring others. I mean, this is just something. Now what we've done is, from a dark dingy place, we're moving to a balcony which is like nicely decorated with plants, with lights and everything, and which is now becoming our language, where we feel completely energized, motivated, and yes, we know what we possess is something of value. So instantly, in our own lens, in our own perspective, the thought has changed for us. So this is how we are changing our perspectives when we are focusing on strengths and when we are looking at it from from this lens. Also, very important is, sometimes we tend to look at people from our own labels. Oh my God, this person, this is just like, this one comes, is not a deep person, always like to have, very high level kind of conversations, etc., etc. Now, for such a person, for example, we call that woo. Some people may start to label people as, oh, that's fake, that's shallow, oh, doesn't care about deep relationships. However, from the strengths point of view, when we are aware of that, then we don't identify ourselves with all of these labels. We go beyond. We look at ourselves as a rapport builder, somebody who's outgoing, people-oriented person, a networker. So a person who's going in a room, collecting so many cards, while a label could be that, oh, this person is just like a bee who's like hovering around too many flowers and just collecting all the nectar, etc. But here, what we are talking about is, oh, this person has the art to be able to go seek new connections, is outgoing, is people-oriented person, and is networking. And over time, one could build rapport around that, which is a great asset for anyone in any place. So the point that we are trying to make here is when we are working from from a place of strength, we are really being ourselves, the natural us. We are actually working towards our own happiness, and that is going a long way in getting us to success. Our approaches may be different, our motivations may be different, our energizing factors may be different, but we are all attuned and and we are completely endowed with that ability to achieve same goals through our own lens. Let's take an example now here. I'll quickly show. So, on the road to success, a person who is competitive may want to climb faster than others. A person who wants to reach the summit before evening may be an achiever. He's got the task on the list and wants to do that and achieve that by the end of the day. There could be a learner there, or it could be a person who's like input oriented person, wants to get a lot of input. So the energy or the motivation may be to discover what's up there, and such a person will also reach the summit. There could be a person who is just like completely connected from a spiritual aspect, or somebody who's like going beyond the idea of self and really enjoys the journey that was once a trail for saints. So all of us, we are going the same trail up to summit. The motivations are different, the drivers are different, and what we are seeking as an output is the same. So in our road to success, how we approach a thing can be innate. In a role as a leader, as a homemaker, as a friend, as a parent, in each of our roles, we could be working with and through our own motivations and yet achieving the goals and outputs of what we are looking at. So with that, I'm going to introduce my top 5. My top 5 is I'm an ideator. I'm a woo out and out. I love talking to new people. Communication, I'm a maximizer, and I take my work super seriously. And that also makes me take a lot of work on my plate. And therefore it took 2 months for Ashish to get me here. So yeah, so that's my top 5. I love this knowledge about myself, and this has really helped me to place myself in where I am in my life. So that's about it. Ashish,
Thank you.
over to
Thank
you.
you, Kanika, for such a wonderful session. You really brought out different aspects of strengths very beautifully, leading to a fantastic closure. So thank you very much. And I'll quickly request everybody to share their feedback by filling out this feedback form that we have put in the chat. It will take you 30 seconds to fill out this feedback form, and then we will open up the session for Q&A and your comments. 30 seconds for this feedback form, and then we open up the session. And once you have filled out the feedback form, please type FD in the chat so that we know you have filled out the feedback form. Feedback done, FD. Thank you, Richard. That was super quick. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm here for questions anyway. So
yes, yes. I also realize that we are at the end of our time. So here are Kanika's coordinates. Please take a screenshot of this and feel free to connect with her for any coaching or any thing you would like to explore with her. Now, those of you who would like to leave can leave the session because we're at the end of the session. Thank you very much for taking out time and connect with us again for a session that we will have next weekend. For those who may have questions, please feel free to stay and take your questions, and we'll be happy to take your questions for another 10-15 minutes or so. And I'll request Richard to go first. You had quite a few comments and questions both. So Richard, maybe you will go first, and then Kanika, if it's okay with you, may I request you to stop sharing your slide?
Certainly.
Yes.
Thank you. Yes.
All right.
Thank you. I was very impressed and honored, first of all, to Ashish to offer the stage, but you, Kanika, for an enlightening conversation. The topic of development has been on my mind for the past decade. So I came from carpenting school, and I was managed to finish an education at Harvard at the latest. So I've been doing well on that part. But here to my first question is, I lived in India, by the way, and that taught me that there are many ways to look at life. To my point is that how do we deal, because I think we've all worked in corporate environments, so there are not per se the most friendly environments all the time. How do we deal with that and not to be pushed into the parts of us that we don't like? Because some people will look at the savannah and the weakest part of your flock in that sense. 2 is, can our strengths be a weakness too? And 3, any feedback on your end, because I think you're intuitive and experienced enough to. And I think at the end of it, kindness can be, especially in my culture, sometimes be perceived as weaknesses, not by the right people, but I think we need to guard ourselves for the wrong people. But thank you for a high quality lecture, Kanika. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you so much. All of those questions are very, very pertinent and very important questions. The approach that I take usually to questions is to really talk from my experience, because I'm no expert. I'm a learner myself. So from my experience, what I've seen is, you said very well that strengths can also be weaknesses. Just as, I mentioned that responsibility, my top 5 is responsibility, and I end up the knowledge that it is responsibility, and I have high responsibility, allows me the understanding that it's hard for me to say no sometimes. I take too much on my plate. So that strength, while we look at strength, it also has a flip side to it, just like we spoke about the basements and the balcony. So it has a flip side to it as well. So I think the awareness through my practice and through repeatedly observing the emotions and having an observer stance has actually helped me in managing some parts of these strengths and weaknesses, or the not so great things about the strengths and talent, because ultimately the awareness is the key. When we are aware that this is what my tendency is, I can manage it better. As for the situations where I've been in the corporate spaces, and it's always tends to get into situations where where we don't like to be. So speaking from this space, that with the knowledge of strengths, I was able to identify that this is something which is not my strength. I need somebody to really support me, either it was as a system or as a person. So it's very important to identify that these are my toolboxes. So one of the things that we did not speak about today was, while we get the top 5 themes, we also get the bottom 5. In 34 order, we also get the bottom 5, which becomes so it's like these so things which are my key talents are some things which are my toolbox. It's my toolbox that I can really use to address any situation in my life. Whereas the knowledge of the bottom 5, that tells me I have the least energy for these 5 things. For example, if I am a relationship oriented person, and my harmony is number 34, So then it becomes like a double whammy because I want relations and I'm not looking harmony. I don't know how to get harmony in myself in those relationships. I'm just taking a hypothetical example and a very tough one at that. So just the knowledge of this can help and allow us to manage the harmony and accentuate the relationship part. I can use the non-harmonious kind of thing by my relationship building, sitting and risking and talking out my own personal experiences with someone to build that rapport. That itself can be good enough to create harmony in certain situations and be authentic about it. So that's how I have approached situations wherever I felt that my energy is not in alignment with where I'm being thrown into. So that was really helpful in my experience, and that made some mistakes, but at the same time kept learning. So that's where the strengths and the knowledge of it has helped.
How was that for you, Richard?
Thank you so much, Kanika.
Thank you. Thank you, Richard.
Thank you, Richard, for those insightful questions. And we would be happy to hear comments or questions from anyone. You can just raise your hand using the reactions button. Yes, Dhruv, please.
Yeah, hi, Kanika, and thanks, Ashish, for this wonderful session.
Thank you.
Hello,
My
Dhruv.
curiosity increases about how do I see. I know some of my strengths, and you have introduced a concept which now looks to me a very, very logical thing. And I'm like, all of us should be aware of our strengths. Now, the question therefore comes to my mind is, how do we know what are our natural talents and strengths? Is there a way?
So there's an online assessment which one can take, and that will give you a report which is available for one to really go through that. It is available on Gallup's website also, and if you are interested, we could share that as a later kind of a post session kind of an information. One could always just search Gallup's Clifton Strengths Finder and could take the assessment and get the reports. If you need any help in getting coached on how do you work with those reports, you can always get in touch with me. I can help you. I'm a trained coach there. So one could really work on that. You'll get your top 5. It'll be very interesting to see top 5 and then the entire sequence of 34 themes, which also tells you then which are the ones which you are the lowest in your energy with certain things. So yeah, and then to help identify those in those 4 domains allows you to be better aware and better in tune to really work with your personal relationships, with your professional life, etc. So yeah, that's available.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Kanika.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you, Dhruv. Anybody else? Any questions or comments?
Hi, Kanika. Thanks,
Hello.
Ashish and Kanika, for this lovely session. It was quite enlightening for me, actually. While yes, we can find out about our strengths and weaknesses, and you said the lower end of the spectrum gives our weaknesses. There's also this school of thought which says that you have to address your weaknesses and get out of your comfort zone. So, how do you, and here we are saying that, yes, we should play upon our strengths and accept our weaknesses. What is the right way? Maybe there isn't a right way, but what in your experience has been, your journey with addressing your weaknesses?
Sure. I'm going to give you a very cliched kind of a quote, which is if a fish continues to learn, wants to attempt trying to climb a tree, it's always going to be known as a failure and is always going to be using the energies on something that one cannot do. Whereas a fish gets best at swimming, it can actually strive and thrive longer in the pond because that's where its strength is. So it is ultimately our own endeavor, what we want to achieve. For instance, a person who's not the best at including people and continues to strive to be the person who wants to include everybody will do a lousy job at that, rather than if the same person knows that they are a great ideator and start to excite others or influence others and get others thought process with their ideas. In that way they'll be able to achieve their, so the idea is to understand what do we want to achieve. My idea is to include others into that. Now, if I continue to focus, how do I include people? I'm never going to get the natural energy at that. Rather than that, looking at the focus, understand what am I good at? For instance, you do not know how to really use, I don't know, in toolbox, if you know wrench, there's a wrench, right? One can use that. If you don't know how to use that and you continue to struggle with it, you're only going to end up wasting time. I have done that. I mean, I'm speaking from my experience. I've done that for the longest time. However, when I started to focus, communication is my strength, ideas is my strength. I'm good at taking responsibility. I started to make connections with people and create some of the things which I would have never gotten done if I would have continued to focus on things which I was not good at. Going back to the example of Tiger Woods, if the man would have continued to focus, how do I get the ball out of the tough area, tough region, which I don't know, the guy would have probably never become the world class player that he was. So ultimately, and unfortunately, that's what the world is focusing on. So many assessments, even strengths profile, several other assessments which are similarly based on positive psychology. They are really ultimately addressing how do we manage the weaknesses. While what we are saying is focus on your strengths, what you're great at, focus on that, and everything else will be managed. So, yeah.
Thanks.
A long answer to your question, but hope that helps.
Yeah, so what I can take away from it is, as much as possible, you can focus on your strengths to address your weaknesses.
That's a good starting point. What I'm saying is not as much as possible, always focus on strengths.
Right. Thank you.
That's a
Thank
good
you.
starting point, though. Thank you. Thank you for your question, Pallavi.
Thank you, Pallavi. That was a beautiful question. Any comments, questions? Maybe we'll take one more. Yes, Sanjana.
I have a question. Like we had a discussion in the beginning of the session, but
Yes,
how do
Sanjana.
we address the weaknesses? Like you said, okay, awareness that this is at the bottom of the list of 34. If you're looking at the list that
So do you
was
have a
there.
specific situation? Because I think Pallavi's question was also similar. So if you have a specific question, perhaps I could share insights from my experience on that. Do you have a specific scenario that you have in your mind about weaknesses?
Yeah. Okay. So if you're looking at something to do with marketing, sales, and technicals of the product, right? You know the product well, but there is, I would say, knowledge is adequate, but then there is a different level of knowledge which could be an ask, because it's not mandatory, but it would help. But then somebody perceives that that is more important than your sales skills, because people come from different stratas, right? They may not have the same strength that you have. So the perspectives of people and what you need to have will be very different, especially in a corporate setup when you are looking at your bosses and you're looking at what you do. It's not that there is, failures to achieve the given targets or the results. That is happening. But the perspective of somebody is very different.
Okay. Perspective towards those targets.
No.
Or to present the technical ideas.
Okay, so they're happy that you achieved whatever the company wants you to achieve, but they think you're not doing it the right way because they do it in a different way and you do it in a different way.
I'd like to invite your attention to, how it's a completely different way of looking at it's a perspective. Somebody is perhaps the person that you're talking about is a person who has a lot of analytical mind, a lot of likes to see a lot of numbers, like to see a lot of analysis, etc., etc. And therefore, the lens is, unless that information is provided, everything on this earth is ready to be discarded. Whereas it could be the other person in question, which I'm assuming maybe you may be a person who is more intuitive, more communication oriented, more relationship oriented, something that you can get done through relationship or through just by the way you connect with somebody or by the way you approach the problem. Maybe your style. So it's like somebody is actually questioning your style because they think that their lens is best.
You're right. Absolutely.
So that's where all of this, and I mean, this is a situation I coach every day. It's like it's been 15 years. So it's like every day we get such situations where somebody's like, my perspective is the one that has more value. I've seen, and this is corporate, but I've seen parents where I saw a person who was high on discipline and would want the child to have a food at a certain time, not even a minute late, sleep at a certain time, blah, blah, blah. And the mother is completely different, who is like, I'm talking about a couple where, the father was discipline oriented, the mother was more harmony, more empathy, and looking at what the child is looking at. And there was a conflict each day because he was like, you're not disciplined enough. And the mother was like, this is a classic everyday situation in the house. So, it's only a difference of perspectives, how a person is not ready to see the other's lens. It's the 6 and 9 kind of a situation that, from my standpoint, if you look at it, it's 6, but you are looking at 9 all the time. So that's where, when we did the coaching for them, they could identify, oh, so I am really stepping on her empathy and he is a discipline oriented person, so there's a box and they could manage things. So I think the idea is, how better can we appreciate each other's perspectives, each other's lenses, and each other's what is energizing and motivating each one of us is what I see you articulating here in this situation, that somebody is not ready to appreciate what you bring to the table. And pardon my using some intuition here. So I intuitively could sense into it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So, got it.
Does it help?
So Anjana has been
Your
in
voice is
situation-
choppy, Anjana.
Yeah. So what should one do in this situation, Kanika, where the other person is on Mars and the other one person is on Venus? How do they look at the same situation?
Get them on a spaceship and meet each other. That's
Interesting. Anjana,
Anjana,
you're
you're
on
on
mute.
mute.
Anjana, you're on mute.
You're absolutely right, because even if one person is willing to look at both aspects, both people have to be looking at both aspects. You're right.
Yes. So it's like awareness of self, awareness of others, and that becoming a language. Unless we have both the people doing it, it's like another person getting another lingo and then creating a lot more chaos. So then the chaos becomes multiplied. So we don't want an exponential chaos in situations like this. Both the people need attention.
True. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for
That
that
was a-
question.
That was a beautiful one, Anjana. Thank you for asking that. And anybody else? Any quick questions or comments? Okay, looks like we have addressed all, Kanika. Thank you very much. Any
Thank
closing
you.
comments, Kanika?
Stay happy, stay motivated, and whatever energizes you, just go for that. Thank you very much. That's the best way to that I have experienced bliss.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thanks for sharing that.
Thank you.
And on that note, we will bring the session to a close. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Kanika, for this amazing session. And
Thank
those
you.
who have attended, please work on your strengths as Kanika shared. You can go to Gallup site and do your Strengths Finder test and connect with Kanika for a coaching session on how to make the most of your strengths and progress infinitely in your career. So have a wonderful week ahead. Thank you very much. And we
Thank
will
you.
see you again next weekend. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.